Hey, this is Professor Ken. Thanks for joining me for this session. So today what I want to talk about is the product life cycle. So what is that? What does that really mean to us as marketers, as business leaders? Well, in simple terms, it's this. Something lives and something dies, right? It's the product life cycle, maybe a business life cycle, the real life cycle. You're born, you go through life, you mature, and then you eventually decline and you pass away. You have death. You no longer exist. That's a life cycle. Well, products go through life cycles too. In fact, I'm at the belief that obviously we know that animated objects, live objects have a beginning and an end. Well, so do inanimated objects, right? Your desk, your camera, your iPhone, things like that. That's part of the product life cycle. They have a beginning and an end. So that's what we need to understand. The product life cycle means that a product will come in and a product will go out. So as a business leader, as a marketer, it's your responsibility to know more or less what's happening there. And why is that important? Why is it important to understand the product life cycle? Because let's say you have one product, you succeed, you get one product out there, it's phenomenal. You have your product is basically introduced into the market, and then it starts growing into the market, and then it matures into the market, and then all of a sudden it starts declining out of the market, and sooner or later you're not selling anything anymore. If you don't understand that concept of product life cycle, and if you don't recognize that your product is at maturity on the way down, what are you going to do when the sales get to zero? Well, you're out of business, right? You're out of business. And that's what the product life cycle will do. It'll help you grow your business, mature your business, and then eventually your business will decline when that product starts to lose its luster in the marketplace. Now, there are basically four cycles, four time periods in that product life cycle. The first one is at the beginning, and what I want you to do is imagine an arc like this, right? An arc that sort of goes like this, almost like a whale's a humpback type of a situation. Sometimes product life cycles go up and down like that, but most of them are a little smoother like that. And the timing of this is interesting because the product life cycle on different products could be days, right? It could be months. It's normally not days, but there are some products. I mean, if you make a fresh food product, a cheese or a milk or something like that, the product life cycle is very short, right? So there could be days, there could be months, there could be years, there could be decades of product life cycles, and I'll explain some of that to you. So let's think about the product life cycle here. Remember, there's always a beginning and an end to something. So in the beginning, you have that introductory phase that's sort of heading out. And it could be a very sharp up, it could be a slow up, depending upon what type of product it is. But basically, the product is getting introduced into the marketplace. So what happens during that stage? Well, typically during that stage, we spend as marketers a lot of money because it costs a lot of money to get a product into a marketplace. So we need to build up the marketing, get the influencers involved, get it all on social media, get the word out, and start building interest in the product, which means generally speaking, you're spending money to do that because you have to promote the product and get it out into the introductory stage. While that's happening, your messaging there is all focused around growing that business and growing that introductory phase. So new accounts, new customers are buying into it. It's exciting. You have some difficulties there because maybe you're growing faster than you could produce. So there could be some opportunities and challenges there. So it's exciting though, because the product is starting to take off. You've done your research and you're prepared for that introduction, and you see that happening. Then past the introduction stage, and during that stage, we have a few people buying into it, right? Let's say it's a technology product. You know, you have to have those true techies buy into it at that time, like the people that can't wait for something to develop. You have those early adapters, we call them. They'll come in and they'll buy the product, and it'll start spiking up, and that's what's going to grow. And then you have the next stage, which is the growth stage. So the growth stage is defined exactly by its definition. It starts to grow into the market. So now you get from that small group of early adapters, you get to a larger group of people who are willing to accept the product, right? So the early adapters prove that the product is good. They might pass on the word on social media or tell their friends about it. So it starts getting into the general public more, becomes more of a household type of a name. And, you know, it goes from, let's say, generally speaking here in the US, the way things work is that the big cities on the East Coast and a couple in the central of the US get the product first, or they mass buy the product, and then it starts filtering out and spreading throughout the country. And that's how you get what we call household penetration on the product. And good household penetration is in double percentages, you know, 30, 40, 50%. I've worked with some products that had 80% household penetration, which means 8 out of 10 homes have that product, okay? So that's pretty phenomenal if you think about that. So during the growth stage, what happens? Well, we have some marketing challenges too, because we're growing. So we have to understand the messaging that we need to get out into the marketplace. Our spend changes a little bit. Our channels, promotion channels might change a little bit too. But here the goal is to keep it growing, right? Vision, we have a plant. You know, when you put the plant into the soil, you water it, you nurture it. That's what you're doing with a product. And then at some given point in time, you're hoping to see that little leaf peek through and saying, hey, I'm here and I'm starting to grow. So what do? You got to put more water on it, more sun, and you got to let it grow, and you see it grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's the growth stage, right? Your product will grow during that stage. So that's really stage 2 of the product life cycle. Eventually, you come out of that growth stage and you go into the next stage, which is maturity. And that's where the curve starts flattening out a little bit. So maturity means that your product has about as much penetration in the marketplace as you will possibly get. So when I speak about household penetration, that's how many houses your product is in, and that's a metric that we look at. And you're at 80% household penetration. That means 8 out of 10 homes have your product. You're just about matured. You know, you're in nearly every single household. Will you get the other 2 households? Possibly, but if you're at 80% for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, you're probably not going to grow much more than that. So you're at your maturity level. So that's telling you a couple of things. That's telling you, hey, we've maximized our penetration of the marketplace. We're at maturity now, which means we have no room to grow. So we have to get some efficiencies out of that product. Maybe our marketing changes, we get a little more smart with our marketing. We look at operations, we look at logistics. How can we pull more profit out of that product? Because we can't get any more because it's hit the growth stage, right? We're sort of like, we're flatlining there. Now that's not a bad thing. And you could be at a maturity level for many years, maybe even decades sometimes, right? But what comes after maturity? Decline, right? So you hit that peak and now you're coming down. Imagine you're going up the mountain, up the mountain, up the mountain. You get to the top of the mountain, now you're at maturity, and now you have to go back down the other side, and you know you got to go down that way. Okay, so if you recognize that you're at maturity for some period of time, you have to recognize that the next stage is decline. And then after decline, it's death, right? Your end comes. So as a marketer, You have to look at that product life cycle to know when you're going to hit maturity, because if you're a smart marketer, if you're a smart business, you're coming up with product number 2 as you come into the maturity stage, because it takes time to get a product launched, a product or service, it doesn't matter. So you're getting ready to come up with product number 2, idea number 2 right behind that. You got to use those profits to get into another product, another opportunity. So the product life cycle will sort of look like this, and as you get to maturity, you should have another product starting over here. It's like, let's talk about the growth of a plant again. Let's think about vegetables, right? If you're planting vegetables, you're gonna wait for maturity, pick those vegetables clean. Well, unless you're gonna wait for that to come out again, you have to plant another crop to be ready when that gets picked, so you can go from one crop to the next, then to the next, and to the next. That's what that product life cycle is all about. You have to be prepared for the maturity and the decline. If you're not, then when that product declines, it's going to be a hard time for you because you had nothing to replace it. So the next stage after that maturity is decline. So when a product declines, again, our marketing and our ideas change. You really don't, if a product is dying, that's when you want to pull as much profit out of that product as possible. You really don't want to make a big investment in that product because it's heading for a sure death. It's very hard to resuscitate something that's heading for death, right? You could try, you may get lucky, and it does happen occasionally when you talk about products, but very rarely does that happen. So you don't want to spend a lot of money to try to get that thing back. What you should have done, or what you could be doing, is putting that new product in the pipeline, so when that product finally comes to its end, the next product will take its place. So that's some of the things that we want to look for when we talk about the product life cycle. So let's talk about the time. Who knows? It depends on the product. It depends on the market. Think about this. The automobile, the gas automobile. What was the first one? 1907, right? Ford, something like that, 1904. Here we are in 2021, so it's 118 years that the gas motor vehicle has been around. Now, we've been talking about electric vehicles for some time. Some states are trying to go all electric and all that stuff. And we got a couple big electrical vehicle companies that are really making some headway finally. But how much longer will the gas vehicle be around? It's been around already for 120 something years, right? It had an introduction phase since the beginning, 1907 to 1930. In fact, the automobile changed the American landscape, right? Driving movies and drive-throughs, fast food, vans and people movers and vacations and all that stuff. It really changed the way America operated. And now here we are going possibly to electric vehicles. So where is the gas motor vehicle on the product life cycle? Are we at maturity? And I don't know what the exact household penetration is, but if every family owns 2 vehicles, gas vehicles, will they have room for an electric vehicle, or will they replace the gas vehicles? Now, there's a lot to consider there, right? Electric vehicles may not go as fast. Electric vehicles might not be so convenient. So there's a lot to consider there. But the question we have to ask ourselves, and the car producers are asking themselves now, is how much longer will the gas vehicle live on? Or the opposite, is the electric vehicle really a threat to the gas vehicle and will be around forever, right? You have to think about that. What about another product? Let's talk about TVs. So the television's been around since what, the late 40s, 50s, and it grew from the 40s to the 60s, and it was 1 TV per house, and then maybe 2 TVs per house. Now there are some houses that have what? A TV in every room, even the bathroom and the kitchen, right? But what are we replacing our TVs with these days? Well, we're replacing our TVs with our small screens, our portables, our handhelds. So where is the TV in the product life cycle right now? Our TV is something of the past, and are we seeing the beginning of the decline of the standard television, right? So that's a good thing to think about there. And then we think about the shorter product life cycles, like phones, versions. And if you use an iPhone, let's say, and I don't know what number they're up to now, 10, 11, 12, I can't keep track. Mine's still, I think mine might be a 9 or a 10 or something like that. But the product life cycle of a phone, every version is maybe 18 months. That doesn't mean you're going to get a new phone, but eventually that basically dates out because you can't get updates anymore. So 4 or 5 years later, that phone that you have is useless. They do that purposely. Some of these companies do that purposely because they want you to buy another product. They want that product life cycle to end, because when that product dies, you have to come back and buy another product. So that's the idea. So the product life cycle is a period of time. The time is really up to the product, up to in some cases, the country, right? And we don't know what that could be, but as business leaders, as marketers, we need to understand that, because we don't want to be caught off guard. Sometimes products die quick. We don't see it coming. Just like in real life, right? People, unfortunately, die unexpectedly. That happens with products too. One day it's selling, next day it's not selling. So there are some explanations and some there are no explanations for. So that will happen too. But generally speaking, most things you can see coming. And if you ignore that, it's at your own demise, because you will ignore the fact that you're losing market share and you're losing the opportunity to pull profits out of it, and throw in, good money after bad, as they say, is a losing proposition. So the product life cycle, again, is introduction, maturity, growth, and then decline and eventually death. But to help manage that process, if you see a product hitting maturity, you should have another plan in place for product number 2 or business number 2 or whatever it is, because there's a business life cycle that sort of follows the same pattern, just like everything else that's out there. So that's the product life cycle. Don't ignore it. Keep that in mind as a marketer, as a business leader, because if you ignore the end of times, then you're going to regret that, right? That's all I have for now. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you out there. This is Professor Ken. So long.